like to take a moment and find gratitude. When you're grateful for just everything, it's impossible to be upset. You can't be grateful to everyone and everything, and not genuinely grateful anyway, and then still hold a grievance about something. And it's forgiveness that removes all those grievances. I forgive myself for this person, situation or event because I'm cleaning up my karma. I was wrong about what I thought the world was for. I've been judging everyone and everything, and that's brought me nothing but misery. So now I'm letting go of that old way of seeing things and realizing that a very ancient spiritual truth that I am one with everything is actually the matter of fact. The situations and events and people and relationships I find myself in that trigger me and upset me and everything are simply my projections. The illusions of my mind that believes that I'm separate from God and that there's actually a me and a someone else. All of those experiences in separation, all of those experiences in projection, denial, blame, they all have to be owned bit by bit or all at once. The sole responsibility of the earthbound soul, of the miracle worker, is to accept atonement for himself at one-ment. I am one with this person, situation or event. It's a manifestation of my own consciousness projected out into form, into some sort of energetic package that I can look at and recognize, so I can come to understand the nature of the power of my mind in this world to make choices and to learn to make better choices. Because this world is the second part of a schism that has occurred to me. This world is the second part of an experience that shouldn't have occurred, hasn't occurred. You always end up at the paradox. This world was made as a place, not created, made as a place where minds can come through the power of their own decision to learn that they are not separate from all things, that in fact they are one with all things, one with God, which is the name colloquially given in this dimension to the energetic, creative source of all things that ever was, will be, and is now. The distraction and the confusion that comes in along the way as part of dealing with things on the physical level, it's pretty normal. You'll get that, it'll come and it'll go, and it's why I always tell people, grab yourself a copy of A Course in Miracles, start to read it, start to do the workbook lessons, and begin to experience for yourself through your own shifts in consciousness that you are one with all things. So that when you cross the veil next time, when you cross that threshold into the great beyond, you'll be headed forwards in the journey of the soul and not repeating a lesson that you failed to learn before. It seems to be a tricky lesson. The appearances of things in the world seem to be different from day to day, but when you realize it's actually the same thing, The external world is one thing, a symbolic representation of denial. But it only represents that when it triggers you. Otherwise it has no meaning whatsoever. It's just a world, an idea, a seemingly real place of form and time and space. And I finally got around to watching the video for the guys, 3 guys that proved and won a Nobel Prize, no less, for proving that the world isn't real through the idea of quantum entanglement, or not locally real, which means it's real according to being observed or not being observed, or in their case being measured or not being measured. I'm not really into quantum particularly. I understand it, I get the idea. I mean, once you experience that all things are one and that form is an illusion, then it doesn't matter what science comes up with, it's going to have to reach the same conclusion in one way or another, in one manner or another. But of course with science, the observer is also false. The person observing that the world isn't locally real also doesn't exist. That's kind of a place where you want to be. And I had a really nice video call with, I won't mention his name, but with a brother a couple of days ago who is in the early part of doing the workbook lessons and reading the course. And we had a nice moment joining in the idea of lesson 10, which is that none of my thoughts mean anything. And there was the temptation on his behalf to want to quantify that. What does that mean, none of my thoughts mean anything? Which of course includes that thought about what does it mean also means nothing. And every time the temptation to want to question or doubt or raise some sort of idea or concept into the frame comes up, greet it with lesson 10. This thought does not mean anything, including your spiritual thoughts. And I love that in the workbook where Jesus says, including, doing lesson 10, apply lesson 10 to your thinking, including the thoughts that come up while you're doing this lesson. My thought about my thoughts not meaning anything doesn't mean anything. And that leaves you in a place. It leaves you in an empty place where you recognize that salvation is not dependent upon your thinking, and that working out your salvation is simply coming to the realization for yourself that your thinking can't help you. You can't work this out. Every time you think you've got a good idea what salvation's about, including me, including this video, it doesn't mean anything. And I think I first came across that idea actually in, it was either Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach or Illusions, also by Richard Bach, 2 books that I read very early on when I was a youth in the dream. And at one of those books at the back, there was a little caveat that said, or a little disclaimer that said, everything in this book is not true, or something like that anyway. And that can be a scary place to stand, or it can be a liberating place to stand, and the choice is really yours. But if you're looking for another perspective, another reference point, another way to begin to see your situation and the world and the universe, etc., then you pretty soon have to come to the realization that it's not going to be in your thinking. If it was, you would have found it by now. There's 8 billion people out there thinking the same meaningless nothing, all looking for the meaning of life in one way or another, not realizing that's what they're actually doing, probably believing they're raising families and going to work and paying taxes. None of that's actually occurring. There is only mind waking up. One mind waking up through 8 billion apparencies of individual consciousness. When I put my finger on my nose and take responsibility for the idea of mind awakening, I am that mind awakening. I am that one mind waking up. And everyone and everything else that seems to appear as 8 billion is simply a reflection of my own dreaming, my own denial, my own externalizing of the potential and the possibility of what separation might look like. And every universe has its own kaleidoscope of that. In this one, it looks like physical form. It's pretty groovy. I actually really have grown to love it in many of its dimensions, in many of its ways. The purpose of it, well, that's part and parcel of awakening, I guess. The idea initially that it represents denial and that it's not the beautiful place you thought it was, that can come as kind of a shock, but once you realize it's actually a classroom and that the good, the bad, the right and the wrong, the duality of it, all underpinned by death, is nothing more than a fabrication for the mind to begin to realign itself to its own internal truth, then it takes on something of different proportions. It's more celestial, it's more beautiful, it's more meaningful. Temporary, but, nonetheless beautiful and celestial and meaningful in that regard. Because true meaning lies in awakening. Because it's a journey of self-discovery. It's an awakening to the truth of self. And the truth of self is the source and the expression of all meaning. All meaning lies with God. And as you realize that you are part of that, and also one with that, then the meaningfulness of your awakening process, even looking at the precursor to that being the meaningfulness of having to experience the denial of being brought to this place, let's say, where you experience yourself in denial unbeknownst to you, takes on a new glow altogether. But you have to see it from this side, not from the other side, not from the ignorant side. Very much like a little caterpillar weaving a cocoon to become the butterfly. You go from that stage of being the egg into the pupae and then coming out and out of that cocoon, growing wings and flying away. That's what it was for in the first place, the whole thing. It was all about that in the first place. But once you realise it was all about that, and once you're about that, then being the caterpillar no longer seems such a horrible thing to have been. It's like, oh, I get it. I had to go through that. I had to go through that to bring myself to a point of questioning, because I was in such a profound state of amnesia. I was in such a profound state of ignorance. hopefully in some years from now we'll be able to be more like the Matrix, where you can choose for the red or the blue pill. You won't have to undergo all this laborious transformation. Hopefully even more people will begin to share these videos and these ideas and spread these ideas, because ideas increase by sharing. And children that are born into this realm or minds that are born into the realm through the avatars of children in years to come might be educated in a singular fashion in their schools and their homes. It might be something that's openly taught rather than something that people are finally so glad they found it, which is what people tell me a lot of the time. So glad I found this, so glad I found your channel and these videos. And I gotta tell you, I never really figured that my own process through this would amount to very much, to be honest. And I'm very grateful to everyone that's helping now and contributing and joining in with it. And I know what a tough journey ahead there is for you. I know that transformation can look like absolute loss of self-identity, and by nature it has to, but I wouldn't want to go back and do this again through the thick of it, in the beginning of it, for all the money in the world, if I'm honest. Not for all the tea in China, as they say, but if I had to, I would. If it helped you, if it helped somebody. It's one of those things, you get out this side of it and you realise what everyone else who's looking for truth, what everyone else who, they don't even realise they're here looking for truth. You realise what a journey they're on, what an incredible journey. And there's this deep knowing that in one lifetime or another you're going to make it. In one lifetime or another you're going to come out of that cocoon and spread those beautiful wings and understand fully the true nature of yourself. It doesn't have to take time, of course. Salvation is not beyond immediate learning, but getting to the place where you want salvation and nothing else, getting to the place where the world you see holds nothing that you want, that's not easy. That's not a simple, I can do that kind of thing. Give up the world and follow me, said Jesus. Give up the world and follow me. Yes, Lord. It doesn't take long before your tummy starts to get hungry and you begin to wonder about your family, and everything comes up, and you just keep going. I remember having the idea of eternity, and if you had a big whiteboard as big as you could and you drew your life, let's say 80 years on that whiteboard, you drew a big line from one end to the other, and that represented infinity, and it just went on and on off the edges of the whiteboard forever. But you could draw your 80 years, 90 years if you're lucky, on that whiteboard, and then you wander back away from the whiteboard. You get further and further back. You just keep going. Eventually the little indicator of your 90 years becomes harder to see, until finally it's just a dot, and everything contained in those 80 or 90 years, your family, your friends, everything in the dream becomes invisible to the naked eye. It's as if it never was there at all. You get far enough back, everything's just a memory. That's actually what this is now. This is just a memory, an idea in the mind of God of a moment when something seemed to have occurred. Jesus calls it a tiny mad idea in the Course. Something seemed to have occurred where mind experienced itself separate from itself. And this whole mechanism of salvation came into play in order to bring self back to self, or awaken self to self. I think the hardest thing for me ever has been trying to reconcile that I'm not even here right now making this video. That I am Christ mind. Speaking, acting, talking through the avatar of Dave to make a video, to play my part in the process of universal awakening, which has already occurred because the script is written, the story is written, God's will is complete already. It's only doubt that doubts it. And doubt is of the ego. Only certainty is of God, because God is one self, one idea, with nothing to doubt. And that plays out in this world below as it does in eternity above. It's pretty groovy. Once you get on this side of things, it's pretty groovy. I think I was saying in our conversation the other day, in our video chat, the video phone call, that it'll be a good 10 years. Once you open that book and start reading, it'll be a good 10 years. If you're really diligent, you're really determined, and you're really willing to use every available resource at this time, the year 2024, which there is some resources out there now. My videos, heaps of other teachers online. Some you'll vibe with and some you won't. The ones that have had an actual out-of-time experience, you'll vibe with those guys better. And I always explain that sort of, like, imagine if you had two people talking about mountain climbing. One of those was a representative from a company that made mountain climbing equipment, and the other one was somebody who'd actually used equipment to climb a mountain. There's a vibration in the one that had actually climbed the mountain that you would resonate with. You would know, because they were speaking from their experience, not just from a marketing point of view, not just how to use the gear, etc. But you've got to teach this to learn it, and you've got to go through that stage of being an unhealed healer and realizing that the idea of healing in itself, although it's actually unnecessary because there's nothing wrong with you, you're perfect, it's a process that you have to go through to realize that for yourself, because there's no point reading it in a book. You have to have the experience. You got to climb that mountain. I love you guys. We'll do another Zoom soon. For those of you waiting for the little booklets that we give out for free, the files are now complete, and as far as I know, they've been sent through and are being sent out for getting quotes. So stand by. All right, peace.